Yep. Now, just be a minute or so. I'm looking for something to talk about. We'll get started.
All right.
The miracle of science.
By the way, my keybinds are like I have two buttons on my mouse. The one of the buttons is melee. The other button is the dive.
Okay.
Get ready for a show.
All right.
I'm claiming this objective. Very hot.
Don't worry, chat. We'll go over sensitivity in a minute. This is something that we already discussed before I started the recording. All right. So yeah, sensitivity looking like a big deal. Other than that, make sure we'll go over. I'm just noting a couple things that we'll go over after the game is over, just because it'll take a little bit longer to talk about, and I want visual demonstrations as well. We'll go over positioning after we're done here as well.
I got you.
Okay. When it comes to bubble usage, don't just immediately drop down your bubble the moment you jump in every single time, because it's not always going to be needed every time you jump in, right? Instead, put it down when it's actually needed to block abilities or to block damage, right? Whereas we've just kind of been plopping it down every single time we ever jump anywhere, right? We put it down. Very good bubble.
That's what I was trying to pull off. 9 out of 10 times I wouldn't land that. I've been working on that a lot with diva bombs.
Alright.
Where were we? I've reached the objective. Let's coordinate our efforts. Barrier active.
Yep. So make sure we're not like backing out and playing pat. So we'll go over aggression scaling after we're done here as well. But just make sure we're not backing up when we have no reason to back up, right? So when we're shooting at people and we're full HP and we have our teammates with us and we have all our abilities, there's no reason why we should not be shooting at them. And where we were kind of like backing up and running away from them.
I got you. I was backing up because of the jump goal.
Yep, so in that case, like if you're trying to dodge a Junkle, right, like all we have to do for a Junk Rattle is just like leap away if the Junk Rattle comes at us, right? And then that's just a very easy way to dodge it.
This will protect us. Barrier activated.
Okay, so there, we backed out outside of our range. Make sure we're staying within our range of our Tesla cannon when we're shooting at people, and not backing up too far away from that. Because there on the soldier, we ended up backing far enough away to where we couldn't actually shoot him, right? And that meant that he was able to shoot us for free, and we couldn't shoot back.
I got you.
Okay. Meleeing is not going to do anything. Typically, melee is reserved for finishing off targets, right? Because it's not really going to do very much for you when you're not finishing off somebody. Okay, nice bubble. Okay. We'll talk about this more after the game. Watch getting really aggressive when you're like 1 HP, right? That's time where we want to be playing passive. Like I said, we'll go more in depth on that. Additionally, when you have Baptiste pinned into a corner like that with your ultimate, add in jumps, because remember that jumps do extra damage, and since you're in a corner, it's not like you're going to be like leaping all over the place. You're just getting extra damage for free.
This will protect us. That's smart. Run through the archives.
Okay, so in that situation, when you have like Anna over in that corner, isolated by herself, like all alone, don't be afraid to use jump to do extra damage and to finish her off, right? Because you're not at risk of dying to anybody else. Additionally, we just didn't notice Reinhardt charging at us, so make sure that we're keeping aware. That's an awareness issue, right? Of being aware of our environments. We'll go more in depth on that if we need to, but just noting that we died because we just didn't look or hear Reinhardt charging at us, and you know, that's very easily we could have jumped out of the way, we could have walked out of the way. If you have 7 seconds until overtime, right, and you don't have any teammates with you, wait till like the last 2 seconds to touch, not 7 seconds to touch, right? Because that gives your team an extra 5 seconds to regroup, and that means that you could be coming in with like 4 people instead of 2 people, right?
I got you.
All right, so we're gonna go over a bunch of things. Don't quite hop into a quick play game quite yet. I'm streaming if you would like to take a look over at Discord. Right, and we're going to go over some stuff. So let's think, what do we go over first? So sensitivity, first and foremost. So when it comes to your sensitivity, why don't you go and try to find your DPI now? So that would be like if you said you have Corsair, so if you just go to your Corsair software, it should just be somewhere within the preferences of like what is your DPI, dots per inch, is what that is. And then while you're looking for that, right, just as of the moment, disadvantages, like right now you have a very, very high sensitivity. So, for example, if you were to have an average DPI of 800, right, so let's just say you have 800, which would be the same as mine, right, let's compare it. I have 800, let's say that, for example, you had 800. My sensitivity in game is 4.5, and I'd say that's a pretty average low sensitivity. And yours, you said, was 31. So 31 divided by 4.5, which would mean that you have almost 7 times my sensitivity, right? So when just for context, when I take my mouse and do a 360, you do 7 360s, right?
Right.
So you do that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? It's just very, very hard, like very high. So what disadvantages that are going to come with that is, firstly, that's going to drastically make it hard. Like even I would say, like, so especially if you're talking with like characters that require mechanics, like a hit scan character, this is going to make it insanely hard to hit shots, right? Because you're going to be moving all over the place, really fast. But then even on a character like Monkey, I would still say that's going to with who I would typically say is not going to have mechanics. I would say that's probably going to impact your mechanics if you have that high of a sensitivity. This is also, I'd say, one of the biggest things is it's going to just lower your awareness in general and make it harder to see what's going on. Because if I, for example, I have a DPI button and I can up my DPI just by pressing the button, and now I'm at like 20,000 DPI, right? And I move. This is like what it looked like on your screen while I'm watching you. Is we're looking around like this, right? And this just becomes very hard to see what the heck is going on, right? Because you can't really see health bars very easily. You kind of have to move in these like really shaky patterns instead of moving smoothly, and it just becomes difficult to see what the heck is happening when your screen looks like this, right?
Right.
So definitely recommend turning that down. It doesn't have to be as low as mine because you're playing main tank, right? You're playing Winston and Reinhardt, I believe you said you're playing, or no, sorry, Winston and Wrecking Ball, right? On Wrecking Ball, that would, if you're using mechanics, right, that would greatly impact your ability to hit shots, right? In general, that's just going to, I would say you can have higher than mine, but I wouldn't really, like, if you have an average DPI of 800, I probably would not go above like 7 or 8 in-game sensitivity, right? That would be like where I'd cap it out. And then a minimum, usually a minimum sensitivity that you go for is 1 360 with your mouse pad. So you should at a very minimum be able to do a 360. So if I'm looking at this person, I can put my mouse on the left side of my mouse pad, drag to the right side, or my mouse space, whatever space I use for my mouse, and I'm able to do a little over a 360, right? This gives you proper ability to turn around and whatnot. So in any case, that's the basics, just so you understand it. If your sensitivity or if your DPI, did you ever find your DPI?
Yeah, I looked at it right now.
Yeah. What is it?
It's in the hundreds, like stage 1, which is red. Stage 1, 800. Stage 2, 1500.
Okay, so you're at stage 2, you said?
natural
Yes.
selection.
Oh, yeah, and what was that? Stage 2?
Stage 2, 1500.
1500. Okay, so again, so this that means when you what you do is you multiply DPI by sensitivity. So that would be 1500 by 31 would be you have an E DPI. Go ahead.
I think that'd be like 45,000.
Yeah, 46.5 thousand. Yep. In comparison to mine, which is 3.6 thousand, right? So you divide 46 by 36,000. You have almost 13 times my sense, right? So
Right.
that's just for comparison. Not to say that my sense is the end all be all, because it doesn't have to be. I'm just saying that you're probably going to find it drastically much easier to function, to see, to be aware of your surroundings, to actually mechanically hit shots if you lower that. And I would just say that's just right off the bat drastically help, right? So let's move on from that. You can figure some of that out after we're done the session. Let me know if you have other questions on that. But moving on, other things. Let's talk about general positioning real quick, because there were a couple times where we broke some rules of general positioning. So, if I'm standing right here, right, and the whole enemy team is standing over here, and they're all looking at me, shooting at me, let's say I don't have jump, right, it takes me 1, 2, 3 seconds to get behind cover. Now, from cover, you cannot shoot through solid objects, so we're good, we're safe. But in that time it took us to walk here, we died because we were too far out in the open. Now, from here, it takes us half a second to duck behind cover, which is 6 times faster than what it just took us, right? Which means that now we can stay alive much, much easier because we have cover to work with. So therefore, good positioning is the usage of cover, whereas bad positioning is the absence of cover. So a couple times, for example, we would just kind of walk out onto the middle of point, and then we didn't really have any cover, and maybe we didn't have a leap, and we were just in a really bad spot where we probably would have been punished and killed for it had we been at like any higher of a rank or up against harder opponents, which if you're trying to get to a higher rank or play against harder opponents, you need to be able to, you know, operate against those people, right?
Right.
And covers all over the place, right? You have slopes like so, you have random pillars around when you're reloading, when you're low health, when you're being shot at, right? You have corners that do the same thing. You have random objects that are around the map, like the payload, right? You have pillar, corner, doorway, corner, right? And then on top of that, high grounds all act as natural cover. They can see us, now they can't. You can see us, now we can't, right? Additionally, on high grounds, it is going to mean that most characters in the game can't reach you. 2/3 need to take the stairs, and then the third that can need to use abilities, right? Which means that now they're out of abilities, which gives you additional survivability. And then on top of that, we have tons of visibility. We can, you know, see over here. A monkey doesn't really, that part doesn't matter as much, but you can see over here, over here, over here, and over there. But from below ground, you can't see any of that, right? So that's just general positioning. Let's move on to leap for a little bit. So with leap, I think that you got the general gist down for like adjusting up and down. So you look up, you go further, you go higher, right? You got that part, but there's some other tech things that you can do with your leap. So firstly, right, this is going to be a normal leap. So 10 meters, we leap forwards. That's a normal leap right there. If we hold spacebar down, then we will get a bounce at the end of our leap, and we'll actually go like, you know, 8 feet further, or 8 meters further. So that's just a useful tech to get some extra distance with it. And then you can go even further, like if you look up in the air, like we discussed, right? We can go look up and bounce, and then like be over to here, right? And then that also is affected if you jump before you leap, right? So like if we jump and then look up, right? So we jump, leap, hold it down. Oh, never mind, that didn't work. Right, so in any case, then there's also, this one is very insanely useful, and that is the short jump. So this is how to jump a short distance, and that is you hold S while you jump, right? So you press backspace while you jump, and that's actually going to get us to go like here rather than all the way over there, right? Which is before. This is especially useful like when you're primaling, right? And you're like trying to, like I saw when we were primaling, we would like primal, we'd boop them, and then we'd like leap past the person, right? So we'd do this, and then we'd like go like that, right? But if we short jump, then we can, you know, end up leaping to them and not going all the way past them, right? When you pin someone in a corner, add jumps in, it's not going to be very much more difficult unless adding in a lot of extra damage. Bubble, make sure bubble usage let's talk about bubble usage a little bit. When it comes to bubble usage, there's a lot of uses, right? You can use bubble when you're low. You can use it when your teammates are low. You can use it when you're blocking abilities and ultimates. You can use it to, like when you see a ton of, an insane amount of damage is coming in. Like let's say your team's grabbed and you need the bubble to save them all, right? You can also use it when you're getting like really aggressive or when you're like backing out and you're low, like you're trying to disengage, right? So those are all situations where you can use bubble. When you don't use bubble, is when none of those situations apply, or it's just like used for spam damage, right? Like so you're just plopping it there to soak up random shooting, right? Which usually isn't going to be too useful, right? It's just going to end up wasting the ability. So what I saw a lot of times is that we would come into a fight, right? And we would maybe go up against like one person over here on the side, and then we'd immediately place bubble, even though it's maybe like I saw situations where like we'd plop it down and it's just like one Ana, right? Or like, and they're not even looking at us, or like one Baptiste and they're not even looking at us, right? So like we'd use it in situations where it wasn't maybe needed because it's people not looking at us, people not shooting at us, people just, even if they were shooting at us, maybe they're just shooting and not using abilities, right? So we maybe dropped it at times where it wasn't really appropriate. So I'd like to see us thinking about how we're using our bubble and dropping it when it's actually needed and not when it's not needed. Let's talk some more. I did not see us very often going for, I guess, hard to say. So I think you got the general gist of, like, I think you understand the concept of you want to be going for supports and DPS, not tanks, because supports and DPS are easier to kill, much easier to kill. I think you understand that general gist from what I saw, but I didn't see us going for their backline as much as you could have been. Like, Monkey can immediately leap anywhere he wants to, right? So, these are tanks. Oh, boom, we're past tanks. Now, you wouldn't want to do this because this is going to get you killed, but I'm just demonstrating that we have that capability to just immediately bypass anybody, yet it seemed as though we didn't do that very often, and a lot of times you just kind of sat at the front, or we shot the tanks, or we didn't really actively seek out those other characters. So I'd just say make sure you're seeking out those other characters and going for like the squishy targets, the DPS, the supports, right, the easier things to kill. When you leap on people, add in a melee as if animation cancels in with your landing, right? So you can melee as you land on somebody. And then that animation cancels. But if you're just on top of somebody, I mentioned this in game, don't just melee them because it's not going to be very effective in comparison to just Teslaing them down. Typically melee is a finisher, right? It's just gonna, you just use it to finish someone off, right? So we Tesla them down and then we melee to finish them off. Let's see, is there anything else? Good.
What I was doing with the melee was basically I watched a bunch of videos on how to play Winston, and I was trying to combine my Tesla cannon with the melee because it's better against armor and ammo usage.
So you're trying to use it because it's better against armor and ammo usage. Okay, so I would say that in general, from what I understand, right, melee and Tesla do the exact amount of damage per second, right? So if you melee somebody and you melee them and you keep meleeing at them, it's going to do the exact same amount of damage per second as your Tesla cannon. But your Tesla cannon has the ability for much greater AoE damage, right? So you can deal damage to a lot more people, and it's also going to be a lot more difficult to actually miss. Whereas if you're meleeing, maybe they step out of range of your melee for like half a second, right? Or you mistime the melee and you miss it, right? Like if we just do that, then that's missed value where we could have been Teslaing. So I think that you could be right. Like if you're right on top of one single person and they have armor, like it's a I don't know, like it's a Reinhardt and we see his armor, sure, maybe, but I'd say in most situations you're not going to be doing that.
Right.
I'd say it's like a very situational tiny thing that where you'd ever use that. When it's one single person who has armor and you're within range and you know you can hit the melees. Right? So,
right. I got you.
Besides that, why don't you... Oh, we were going to talk about aggression. One moment, I'm going to take a sip of water. Alright, so basically, we're going to go over aggression real quick. So, there are a lot of things that go into aggression, right? When should you be getting aggressive? When should you be getting passive? And basically, when you think of your aggression, you want to think of it as a scale. So think of 0% as being really, really incredibly passive, right? And 100% being really aggressive. So when you come into a fight, you're coming in with no advantages, disadvantages, no nothing. It's a neutral, right? So the moment you enter a fight, you're typically coming in at 50%, which is your neutral. So what that means is that you are going to adjust upwards on the scale if you have advantages and if you have opportunities, and you are going to adjust downwards on the scale if you have disadvantages and a lack of resources. So let me define some of these terms for you. So advantages. Advantages are things such as being up teammates. You know, for example, let me just walk you through that real quick of like just, I don't know if we necessarily struggle. I think we maybe saw like 1 or 2, so we might as well go over it. But just how do you tell whether or not you're winning or losing a fight, right? Impacts this. So if you are up, and this all comes down to kill feed, watching kill feed. But if you are up or down 1 to 2 people, that is an advantage or a disadvantage, right? You're going to play more aggressive or more passive accordingly, right? Based off of how many people you're up or down. When you are up or down 2 to 3 people, that's going to be a won or a lost fight, right? At that point, you don't use ultimates because that'd be just a waste of your ults. And then you're going to get really aggressive in the one fight. And then if it's a lost fight, you're going to get out if possible. And if you can't get out, you're going to let them kill you so that you do not end up staggering yourself. Are you familiar with what staggering is?
What is... Can you explain it?
Yeah, you're just, that's why I ask. So staggering is just anytime you die late, essentially, right? So if I, you know, die 10 seconds after all my whole other team died, well, now my whole team respawns and they have a choice to make. Either they wait for us, in which case we've just wasted a bunch of time, or they run without us and now they're at a disadvantage and more likely to lose the fight. Right? And this can also start staggered trains where, like, let's say 2 people die, and then 2 people die, and then 2 people die. So now the 2 people who respawn come out of spawn, and then we respawn. But by the time we respawn, those guys went in and died by themselves because they were stupid and they ran in with 2 people, right? And then now we run in and we die, and then it just keeps on going again and going in a loop, right? So that's like a stagger train. And we had, for example, in our game, we had moments where we went in without any teammates, right? Where we just engaged when it was like 2v6, right? So think, for example, in that last fight when we went in like 5 seconds too early, and it was like a 2v6, right? So in those instances, that's being aware of kill feed, that's being aware of tab, but then also before we're engaging, look around you, right? Pay attention to where your team's at. So if we're going in here, before we're turning this corner, we want to do a quick, 360, go, do I have my team with me? Okay, I don't, I have to wait a little bit. If I do, then now we can engage, right? So that's how to tell whether or not you won or lost the fight. So that goes into aggression scaling, right? Advantages, your up kills. That means that you're going to go up the scale. So let's say that we are up a person. Well, now we maybe go from 50 to 60% aggression, right? We're just going to play a little bit extra aggressive, going a little bit further. Maybe we're up 2 people. Now that might be like a 70 or 80%, right? We're up 3, 4 people. Maybe that's like a 90%, and then, we're up 6 people. That's 100% aggression, right? We're just going in, right? No stop. So that's... And then it goes the exact opposite way with the disadvantages, right? We go downwards on the scaling if we have disadvantages, right? Now, additionally, other things that affect it, you have opportunities. So, such as seeing somebody who's like 1 HP, such as somebody being out of position. So, like, for example, if we're on Monkey, right, and we see somebody who's all by themselves over in this corner over here, right? Well, now we can get really, really aggressive on this person because it's in an opportunity to get a kill, right? So we go up to 100% for that person, right? So those opportunities put us up. Opportunities never put us downwards, right? Like if we don't have opportunities, we're not gonna drop to 10%. And then you also have a lack of resources. Lack of resources put you downwards, but they do not put you upwards, right? So if lack of resources could be you not having health. It could be you not having abilities, not having ultimate, right? Not having ammo, right? And that's a lack of resources. It could also be team resources as well. Okay. So for example, you could be at 50%, and if you have health that's not gonna put you above 50% to 80%, right? That's not how it works.
Right.
But it will, if you lose that health, it will drag you down. Like if you are down and now you're 1 HP, well, now you are going from 50% to 10%, right? Or 0%, because you need to get healed before you get aggressive again, right? So that's how that works. To clarify as well, don't feel like this is very rigid. This is a very fluent and fluctuant. You are going to be changed. This whole scaling system could change within the course of 1 second. So, for example, you could be up 3 people and being at 100% aggression, going in, and then all of a sudden you get shot at and you're 1 HP. Well, now you're going from 100% to 0% within the course of a second, right? So that means that it's very fluent and it's going to be changing. Don't feel like you have to be at 100% for the next 5 seconds and then 10% for the next 10 seconds, right? It's very fluent, changes. All right, you can go ahead and queue up for another game, and then we'll go from there. Just to make sure, does all of the things we talked about so far make sense? Any questions?
No, yeah, that makes sense. I've been trying to work on my aggression and stuff and being a little bit more aware. I'm gonna try going on to lower DPI, which is like almost half. Alright. I'm just gonna go monkey again.
Yep. And then, yeah, just know that, like, even if you were, like, even at half of your current sense, that's still pretty high. So that's just my own, my own input there. If you want to have it as a high sensitivity, I don't think that's an issue, especially if you're playing main tank, if you have a higher end sensitivity. But there is a point when it comes to high sensitivities where it's just, or even when it comes to low sensitivities where it's like just going to be a hindrance. Like if you put your low sensitivity at where you do 1 inch, you move your mouse across your whole mouse pad and you move an inch, right? You're gonna have problems, right? In the same way that if you move your mouse across your whole mouse pad and you spin around, 7 times, that's an issue, right? All right, I am spectating you now.
Now entering.
I just checked my DPI. If I put my mouse across the mouse pad, it'd be like 2. Like
okay.
rotation.
Yep, that does not sound nearly as bad as doing, like 10. Also, how big of a mouse pad do you have?
Relatively small.
Relatively, okay. So that's another thing, is that the lower you go, the bigger mouse pad you're going to need, right? So if you wanted to go to a lower sensitivity, which might be recommended, as most people do recommend that in the gaming community, you might need to lower your sensitivity, or sorry, get a bigger mouse pad for that.
I feel great. Barrier activated.
Good dodge. One thing I forgot to mention last time, watch your spam jumping. So that's not a very big deal. It's a very low priority, but you don't want to go jump, just because that's going to make you an easier target to headshot. And overall, you also just lose control over your mobility. So not a very high priority, still a thing to consider.
Got you.
Oh.
Oh, that was a bad jump.
Alright, so in that situation, why do you think we died?
Because I did a high jump instead of a
Okay, I'm thinking that we were pretty much screwed even before we messed up the jump. What got us screwed in the first place? Was it the Reinhardt charge?
The Reinhardt.
Alright,
Yeah.
So in that situation then, what could we have done to not have been charged?
Been a little bit more aware about where Reinhardt was.
Okay. In what way could we have been more aware? Visually,
Better positioning.
I'd probably say the biggest thing there was audio awareness, right? Listening, keeping our ears open, because we get an audio cue when Reinhardt charges, right? We hear him charge. So listening for him, we can hear that he charges from anywhere on the map, pretty much. Alright, so in that instance, just noting like, I don't think it was terrible, but just noting that we did primal after we were down 2 people, which means that that could have already been a lost fight, or just a really big disadvantage. Besides that, I think we may need to cover target priority a little bit, and go in depth on some of that after this game is over.
Right.
Typically, bubble is going, not all the time, but typically bubble is going to be one to use after we leap in and get aggressive, not just plopping it down in place, right? Now, exceptions would be like if we're blocking an ultimate, or if like someone's 1 HP on, you know, if we or our teammates are 1 HP, but typically, if at all possible, we want our bubble to get aggressive with, because otherwise we can't really get aggressive, right? Because that's just one of the easiest ways that we can get aggressive.
Got you. What do we got here?
Flight routine activated.
Nice.
Barrier activated.
Experience tranquility.
Get in there. Knock on my door. Take cover.
This will protect us.
No one can hide from my sight.
Just watch that range on your Tesla. Sometimes we just put ourselves like right outside of the range, and that's happened like not like insanely frequently, but it does happen like every other fight where we'll be in a duel and then we'll just back up an inch and we'll be just right outside of that range for a couple of seconds, right? So make sure we're staying within that range of our Tesla cannon. Get used to it so that because you know that could potentially end up being the difference between getting a kill and not getting a kill, right?
Right.
If we're just backing up randomly. So make sure that we're staying within that range, and so we actually can do damage. If you're trying to be sneaky, watch how much you're moving around, and also probably recommend crouching, because that'll muffle your footsteps, make it harder for people to hear you and react to you. Uh-oh. Now it's unfortunate you got trapped. Thing that could have saved us there was primal. Another thing is make sure remember that you can use jump for damage, right? To kill people. So if you're in like a 1v1, jumping can make it harder for him to hit you while also doing extra damage, right? Killing him faster.
I was watching for the Junkrat arms when he dies.
Yep. Very nice.
Excuse me for dropping in.
I like that we're taking high grounds. That's good. You probably, so in that situation, you can keep up that aggression, because note that like even if you're going into their spawn, they were still down so many people, right? So your aggression can be higher. You have primal, you have full HP, you had all of your abilities, right? So that was a situation where we backed up a little bit and we got to like 40% when we could have been 80%, right?
Adjusting angle of attack.
So right now maybe we could be like up with our Zarya, right? Just in between fights, we want to be like retaking high grounds if we can, especially if your team's like up there too.
I was watching the Zarya the whole time, just in case she was in trouble.
Yeah. But it puts us in really good positioning, like as we discussed. We'll go over maybe a little bit more too on something similar.
This will protect us.
Yeah. Remember those short jumps? Because notice how we're like leaping past them. Yep. So 3 things there, right? So firstly, short jumps, right? It's gonna help tremendously. Secondly, pin them, attempt to go and pin them into corners. That way they can't just be bouncing around and it locks them into place. Thirdly, at the very end of our primal, look to disengage with it, right? You don't want to end your primal in the middle of their entire team. You want to end your primal getting back to your team, right? Unless, of course, the situation dictates otherwise, right? Because there's always maybe like you're full HP and they're low and whatnot, right? But in most cases, you're going to end your primal getting back to your team. Okay. Another instance in where maybe like rather than just plopping down bubble, we could have jumped in and unbubbled, like when we're on top of them, right? Maybe finishing off the junk before he's able to get away. Don't be afraid to like dive people, especially if like they're on their own. Like if Junkrat's in that tiny little corridor by himself, that'd be a perfect opportunity for you to dive him and get on top of him and kill him, right? That's an opportunity. Yep. So unfortunately, we just want to watch for the trap, right? Because then that's what ends up getting us killed, unfortunately. So yeah, we just want to watch for that because we can, if we're being careful about it, we can dodge that, right? Even like we could dodge it when we're midair. We can maybe just walk up to Junkrat. We could have dove up onto the top left high ground rather than diving in to the corridor with him. Okay. Kind of stepped into that charge, right? So be careful of that. We have leap. We have just make sure you're walking to the left or right of it. Be aware of it. Might talk about some more stuff on that too afterwards here. Audio awareness there told us that there's a Junkrat up top behind us and we didn't hear him. We might discuss a little bit on audio awareness and awareness after this game is over. Okay. When you're up a bunch of people, that's time to be getting aggressive, right? So like even now we could just be pushing into their spawn, right, and just like getting the extra kill on the Genji, right? Exactly. Alright, so we're going to go over a couple things, not as many as last time, I don't think. So let's see. We were going to review real quick awareness and audio awareness. So audio awareness real quick. Firstly, I would recommend turning up your normal master volume if needed. Then I would recommend turning down or off your music volume. That can end up cluttering with audio. I would check your headset settings and see, do I have surround sound enabled? If it is not an option for you to enable, turn it on in-game, Dolby Atmos for headphones, right? This is going to give you sound that surrounds you and makes it easier to tell where sounds are coming from. Besides that, you could have all those settings be pretty bad and still have good awareness audio awareness if you are listening, right? Actively paying attention to gunshots and footsteps and ultimates, and abilities, right? So if you're paying attention to those things, then that means that you will have better audio awareness, right? So for example, there's a Junkrat like just up top behind us, right? So Junkrat's like up here shooting at stuff and the fight's over and we're just kind of chilling here when we could have turned around, jumped up and killed Junkrat, right? And you can tell that through audio awareness, even though I currently have it at 20%, 20%. Usually have this at like 60, so I have it at like a third of what I usually have. It's just because I'm actively listening for it, right? So then now let's get a little bit more into awareness and audio awareness, because you might be thinking, well, I get the stuff like you talking to me about doing short jumps, right? Like I can practice that relatively easily, right? All I have to do is just press S, right, when I jump. That's pretty simple. But how do I get better at audio and awareness in general? That seems like a very vague concept, right? Well, you get better at awareness the exact same way that you get better at anything that you're trying to get better at, and that is that you're going to focus on it while you play. And that's the same way that you get better at anything IRL or in-game. And what that would look like is you're going to focus, right? You're not going to be autopiloting, you're not going to be just playing to play, and contrary to popular belief, you're not going to be just purely playing to win. Instead, you're going to be playing to improve, and then that will actually lead to improvement rather than stagnation, which happens when you only play to win. And then additionally, what that looks like within your gameplay is you're going to be thinking to yourself, awareness, 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 right? And giving yourself a constant reminder to be thinking about awareness, right? And when you constantly remind yourself to look around and pay attention and listen, well, then that's what awareness is looking around and listening, right? And then therefore your awareness is going to be better. Once it's better for a certain amount of time, that forms it as a positive habit. Once it forms as a positive habit, then you no longer need to put as much attention and effort into it. You can move on to something else. It just kind of comes naturally now, right? I will recommend don't try to do everything all at once. We're talking about a ton of things here that's going to get overwhelming if you do try to do everything all at once. Instead, pick out one category of things or 1 to 3 smaller things within a category to work on. Does that all make sense?
Yeah.
All right. So besides that, let's talk real quick about target priority. So I don't think that this is like an insanely big thing, but just a thing because I noticed it in a couple situations. So target priority. Who should we be shooting at? In general, one of the easiest ways to go about this is just who's the easiest people to be killing, right? Typically, that is not tanks, right? Tanks have 2 to 3 times the health of other characters. They have armor. They have tanking abilities. They have shields, right? So they are very, very difficult to kill. Whereas, and we saw a couple situations where we just kind of actively went for the tanks when maybe we shouldn't have, right? Now, that's not to say that we never shoot at tanks. We shoot at them when they're low, when they're out of position, when they're the only thing we can shoot at. Essentially, when we have opportunities or we have no other option, right, is when we shoot at tanks. But as Winston, we can just, leap straight onto any of the other targets we want to. So there are a couple situations where we were kind of on the tanks when we maybe should have been not on the tanks, right? So not to say that was your entire gameplay. I have seen people where their entire gameplay is tanks, but I think it was just a couple situations where we could have been shooting at the right things and we weren't really. Now, moving on from that, let's talk a little bit about hard diving versus soft diving. So a hard dive is essentially when we go in really, really aggressively with the intent to kill, going all out, right? So that'd be like if I'm starting from point A and everyone's on point and I just go in, right? I just go, bam, we're going in. I'm bubbling, doing stuff in the back line, right? That's hard diving, okay? Yes, sir. How to phrase this? So the disadvantages to that, right, is that you are going to die in a lot of situations if you try to do that, right? You're just going to get melted by their team because they're going to turn around and shoot at you, and you don't have your jump for another 6 seconds, right? Or 5 seconds. So they can just turn around and kill you very, very easily if you're doing that. So you can only do that in specific instances, right? Like if you see an opportunity, right? You can hard dive somebody if they're on their own, or you can maybe go in and get a little bit extra aggressive if somebody's low HP. You can go and get extra aggressive if like they're all dead and it's just a couple of people, right? You can hard dive if you have primal. You can hard dive if you have your entire team coming with you in a coordinated dive, right? So those are all situations where you can hard dive, but if none of those situations apply, you do what you call a soft dive, right? Where you're not going in with the intent to kill, but you're being safer about it. You're going in with the intent to do damage, to get ult charge and wait till you get primal, which opens up an opportunity to hard dive, right? And to open up, and it also creates space for your team, right? Because you're distracting them, right? So a soft dive, for example, would look like something like this, where we come up and take high ground, right? We give it a couple of seconds. Then from high ground, we can just drop straight on top of them. And it might not seem very different, but there's a very significant difference because now we can, let's say they start shooting at us and we're low, we can immediately leap back out to high ground, right? Whereas before,
Right.
the other time, we didn't have leap because we used it to get in there, right? So this would be a soft dive where we're not diving, we're not dropping in with the intent to kill. We're dropping in, we're creating space, we're getting ult charge, we're shooting at stuff. Maybe if we see an opportunity, then we can kill them, but then we get contested, oh, we're out, right? We're back up to high ground, we get healed, we rinse and repeat, right? That's soft diving. You can also do that by like walking up to them, right? Like we can just walk up while we're using cover, get close to them, you know, plop a bubble down, do this, and then leap out when we're pressured, right? There's a couple different ways we can do that, but that's just, I want to explain that concept because there are a couple situations where we like hard dove when we couldn't hard dive, right? Or we very rarely soft dove, right? And we'd either just, we would be in hard diving or we would just sit out, right? That's another thing I'd mention is that like sometimes we just kind of sat there. And typically we don't want to just sit there because that means that we're lacking in value, right? That's just what you call actions per minute, is doing as much as you can all the time, right? If you were to compare a Grandmaster player to like a bronze player, right? A bronze player is gonna maybe, they're gonna come into a fight, they're gonna go pew pew shoot shoot, and then they're gonna randomly stop for 5 seconds. And then they're going to go pew pew shoot shoot, and then they're going to be like, oh wow, look at the scenery, right? And they're going to be distracted for 10 seconds, right? It's just going to be like that, whereas a Grandmaster player comes into a fight and then keeps fighting the whole way through, right? Without, you know, with exceptions to that, right? So within our gameplay, sometimes we just sat out a little bit.
Yeah, like, I think the problem is, like, I know what hard diving and soft diving is. The problem is like, how would I be able to soft dive on like certain maps, like the choke between point 2 and point 3, like on King's Row.
Yeah, so choke be on defense, like when you're on defense in 2 to 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in that situation, we're like taking high ground above them, right? We can just drop on top of them, right? Or playing on the corner, right? Where like if we're on the corner, we can just like, you know, soft diving doesn't always necessarily need to involve getting into the backline, right? Like it could be the difference between like, you know, we're playing on the corner and their tank's right here and we're just contesting cart while poking at them and just going like this, right? And then if we see an opportunity, then we leap on it, or we get our ult and then we can go in really aggressively, or our team starts ulting and they get aggressive, then we can go, or we get a couple kills and then we go, right? So that soft diving isn't always necessarily I have to be finding a way to traverse to their backline, right? That's not necessarily what soft diving is. Soft diving is basically just doing things while we're looking for hard diving. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. It was just the I kind of like, I know a concept of soft diving of Route 66, like when you're first transporting, like by spawn. It was just you jump on top of the diner, take some damage, and drop back down. So that was like one of the concepts I learned.
Yeah, or alternatively, you're not trying to take some damage, you're trying to deal some damage, right?
Yeah. You know who Yeedle is?
Yep.
Yeah, I've been watching his unranked Grandmaster, and I've been trying to take some notes from that because it helps with the concepts.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so we're going to, let's see. Yeah, we're going to here. I'm trying to. I don't think that there is anything else I'm going to talk about. So we're going to take the last couple minutes here to go over what are the main points of the session, do a quick review, and then wrap it up from there. So let's see. Let's start with abilities, right? Abilities wise, jumping. Make sure we're just a couple situations like where we just wouldn't jump when we could have had opportunities to jump in, which gets into a little bit of aggression. But just jumping when we see times to jump. Press S for a short jump. Hold spacebar at the end of jump for the extra bounce at the end. Make sure that we are, or when we dive on top of somebody, we can melee cancel on top of them for some extra damage. Then bubble. Make sure we're not just plop and bubble down anytime we ever see somebody, right? We want to actually use it when it's needed, right? So think, you know, when do I actually need it? Am I low? Is my team low? Am I blocking any abilities or ultimates? Am I going in like really aggressive here? Am I blocking a ton of damage with this, right? So just think about those things. And then typically try to save it for like when you're getting aggressive. Not all the time, but, you know, do your best to use it for when you're diving in, whereas sometimes you would just kind of like, instead of using it after we're diving in, we'd just plop it down here, and then we wouldn't have bubble for when we go in, right? Now, that overall ability usage is maybe like a medium priority, somewhere around that, for you to work on. Then, ultimate usage. I think that we had good ult timing for the most part. With some inconsistencies, like make sure we're not using them in more lost fights. Besides that, look to pin people into corners. Short jump in it, that's going to help stop you from just leaping straight past people and can lead to better combos. Besides that, make sure that you are using the last little bit to get back out to your team, because you're probably going to be taking a lot of damage when you're primaling, right? So we're going to primal, we're going to come in, we're going to boop people around, we're going to pin someone into a corner here. When you're pinning someone into a corner, add in leaps, because that does extra damage, and then we're going to use the last second to leap back out to our team, right? So, and get to safety. Overall, that one probably comes in around the same as our ability usage, around like a medium, right? Maybe even like those who could be a low to medium, around that range. Mechanics, Monkey does not have direct mechanics, but this category would include just DPI, working on fixing that, and working in sensitivity, working on that. Maybe getting a bigger mouse pad, maybe lowering it even further. Just consider all that stuff, mess around with it. Probably recommend it. The majority of the gaming community agrees that lower sense leads to better accuracy, and then I'd also say, like, if it's too high, better awareness as well if you have lower. Besides that, make sure we're shooting at the right targets. Don't shoot at tanks all the time. Shoot at supports and DPS, and then we shoot at tanks if they're the only thing we can't shoot at, or if we have an opportunity to kill them, right? Besides, and then overall, that one's probably like a low to medium priority category, maybe even a low, right? Then you have positioning. Positioning, make sure we're using cover. Good positioning is usage of cover. Bad positioning is the absence of cover. Make sure that we are taking high grounds and go rotating there in between fights. We can also, high grounds are fantastic positioning for us because we can soft dive from there, right, and drop on top of them. Make sure that, let's see, make sure we're staying within range of Tesla cannon. Tesla cannon range, I think let's see, it's 7 meters. Okay, trying to find the range here. I believe it's like, it's further than I thought it was. Okay, so this is almost 10 meters. Wow, that's actually further than I thought it was going to be. So it's like 9 meters. Sometimes we would just like step outside of that. But you also have to note that like it has to be, yeah, so make sure we're staying within that. Sometimes what we would do is we'd like back up to here and we'd keep shooting and we just stay here. And then this is what the next like 5 seconds looked like, right? Was we would be here and then we back up and then we'd be doing this for a couple of seconds, right? So just make sure we're sticking within range. Overall, that category comes in at like a medium priority, around the middle 2. Then besides that, awareness/aggression. Make sure we're watching our health bar, right? When we're low, back up, request healing. Don't keep on getting aggressive. Make sure we're listening, keeping our audio awareness up. Make sure we're paying attention to where's the enemy team at and where's our team at. Making sure we're like not walking in without our teammates. Look around you. Pay attention to where they are. Check them before you're getting aggressive, right? Pay attention to what's happening in kill feed, who's winning, who's losing, right? Just reminder, it's 1 to 2 is an advantage, disadvantage. 2 to 3 is won or lost fight. Don't get if you lost the fight, look to get out if possible, or let them kill you. That way you don't stagger yourself, right? And then besides that, aggression scaling, right? All of that awareness stuff goes into a scale, right? 0% passive, 100% aggressive, 50% is neutral, right? Adjust up with advantages and opportunities, adjust down with disadvantages and a lack of resources, right? And then overall, that category probably goes like a medium-high priority. This category also gets the soft dive versus hard dives, right? When to do each goes into aggression, right? Knowing when do I play aggressive, when do I play passive. And then that's about it for that category. So put that in order real quick. Number 1 is going to be awareness/aggression. Number 2 is going to be all these 3 are like very close to each other. Probably say number 2 is positioning. Number 3 is probably ability usage, and then 4 is ultimate usage, and then 5 is mechanics. That one probably being like a little significantly like the lowest. And then that's about it. Any questions about anything we've talked about or anything else in general?
Excuse me for dropping in.
No, not really. I appreciate this a lot. It's helped. Like, I'll definitely work on the things you said. Like, I'll play around with Winston's ult because I need to get better with that, with the short jumping and the combos and stuff like that. I need to work on when's a good time to be aggressive, being aware of my team, because that's like a big thing. Like, I've been trying to. I'll definitely work with what you said, because I feel like I should have been a little bit more aggressive at times, and should have been a little more passive at times. But I got what you're saying. Yeah.
All right. Sounds good with me. So I